Hello and welcome to True's Tapping into Transit series. Today we're going to explore social equity within a transportation planning uh, and specifically what Ford Motor Company and the Ford Autonomous Vehicle and Mobility Business arm of Ford is looking at in terms of mobility solutions. I am Megan Owens, Director of True, and I'm very proud to be joined by Clarinda Barnett-Harrison, who is the Head of Equity and Inclusion for Ford Autonomous Vehicles and Mobility Businesses. That's quite a title there. Thank you so much for joining us, Clarinda.
Thank you for having me, Megan. I've been familiar with True since the early days of my career in urban planning, wherein I started out at SimCog in the early 2000s. So happy to have this full circle moment.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I know that one of your main responsibilities is to infuse equity into the various mobility solutions that Ford's developing across the country. Can you elaborate on what that means? How do you infuse equity into mobility practices and businesses?
Well, mobility and autonomous vehicles is an emerging industry. So it really starts internally. It starts with the people and the talent that we have within the company, how we're thinking about the future of mobility, and making certain that those thoughts are inclusive of everyone, whether it's across income, whether it's across geographic and spatial access, and people with diverse abilities. And so it starts with our own internal philosophy around what it means to ensure that everyone has the freedom to move. We have to do that. We have to master that before we're able to do anything that influences our products and services.
I like the broad definition of equity, and you were saying to ensure everyone is able to move. Is that that is awfully close to True's goal, True's mission in terms of everyone should be able to get where they need to go.
Yeah.
How does Ford, traditionally a car company, look at ensuring everyone can move?
We think about it from a systemic standpoint. So we know that personal vehicle ownership is something that we aspire for as a car company, but we recognize that that's not feasible for everyone for a myriad of reasons. So we know that the future of AV and the future of mobility solutions, which includes micro mobility options, like scooters and e-bikes, et cetera, ride hailing services and microtransit. Those are parts of systems that can work in tandem with personal vehicle ownership and public transportation in order to create comprehensive solutions that allow for people, no matter what their vantage points are, to be able to access a comprehensive system for mobility. So from our perspective, we're thinking about how do we plug into that system and fill gaps so that we're making sure that everyone has access.
Excellent. Yeah, for years, people have been very surprised that Ford supports improving, expanding transportation, public transportation in the Detroit region, assuming that somehow it's a threat to the auto business. And I know that for many years, Ford leadership, UAW leadership have really recognized the importance of transit for Detroit. How do you see transit and cars working together towards sort of that equitable urban mobility that you were referencing?
Well, I think for me personally, it goes back to my background as a person who grew up in Detroit. When transit has worked for me, I used to take the bus to get to school. But before I get to the bus stop, my mom would drive me there because I'd have to leave very early. So it was in our own way, we were already accessing what a comprehensive system might look like. As a non-driver young person, I was okay with using public transit, but my mother on her way to work would take me to the bus stop and wait with me until the bus arrived. So I think that if we sort of extrapolate that philosophy around these types of systems work together, and together they can create complete solutions that work for people despite what their needs are. I think that's the way I tend to think about it from that very personal experience. And you're right, for years now, Ford's leadership has really started to be leading edge around thinking about, what does it mean for us to be a car company, and also hold the truth that we need to ensure that people are able to move and that personal vehicle ownership may not be an option for everyone.
That's a great point. And I like that we often do use a mix of different modes. Sometimes it's getting a ride to the bus stop or other such intersections. It doesn't have to only be one or the other. And that's certainly something we've long envisioned, that people should think about, what is the most convenient way for me to take this particular trip? Do I want to hop on my bike? Is this appropriate to get a shared car? Is there a convenient bus? Do I need or especially want to have a personal vehicle? But it's certainly been a challenge to ensure people throughout Detroit have those choices to get around. Despite the understandable excitement and the great potential of electric vehicles, of autonomous vehicles, they're often seen as inequitable, especially for people who can't drive or who can't afford a car, because it's unlikely that they'll be substantially cheaper than cars are today. So what can be done? What is Ford looking to do to make electric and autonomous vehicles to become more equitable for everyone?
So I'll speak to the autonomous vehicles side, since I work for the AVLLC. Okay. So from the autonomous vehicle standpoint, we start with that point that I made earlier, that we're not just thinking about this from a personal ownership model. We're thinking about this from, how do we move people and how do we move goods? So right now, what we're doing is testing moving goods, for instance, in low-income areas where there are, food access challenges. In Miami, we partnered with a nonprofit organization that focuses on food deserts in Black and Brown communities, and it's called Health in the Hood. They are growers, and they had a problem with getting the food to people who need it most, especially during the pandemic. And so we were able to deploy our vehicles. This was, in this case, a personal manned vehicle, but the solutions that are being developed is helping us to understand, how do we create solutions that are serving people most in need? That's still equity. Even though they don't own the shuttle or the vehicle, we're making sure that a critical need is being served through revolutionizing and democratizing access to mobility. We have a similar project that's taking place with an unmanned vehicle, an actual autonomous vehicle in Corktown, where we're partnering with Gleaners and a senior home. And we're delivering food in Corktown to that senior home using an autonomous vehicle. Those are the types of technology solutions we're testing, so that no matter what your mobility, no matter what your mobile needs are, no matter, whether you're able to afford a vehicle or not, we're using this technology to bridge gaps and to ensure that we're creating a more equitable society.
That's great. I like those examples. A lot of people feel like they have to have their own car, not necessarily for the everyday trips, but for the grocery trips or for those occasional uses. And if they can use a shared vehicle, if they can call the autonomous vehicle as that technology develops for those certain trips, like the big grocery trip or such, then they can don't have to put quite so much into the other expenses of maintaining an individual car when a shared car would make a lot more sense. That's a great example. As we look towards wrapping up here, I'd love to get any thoughts you have on next steps towards improving mobility around the city of Detroit. What are there other pilots or programs that are underway, or are there things that you feel need to happen to really improve mobility for Detroiters and people throughout our community?
Two things. One, I'm really excited about the fact that autonomous vehicles can really create revolutionary and transformative change for people with diverse cognitive and physical abilities. This is an opportunity for people who were previously relegated to, an immobile state if they aren't able to drive, to being able to take long distance trips, potentially independently. So I'm excited about the type of technology that's being developed that's truly helping to create a sense of freedom for people with diverse abilities. In terms of what's next and what's important, I think that all too often, there are not many women or people of color with diverse backgrounds in the room when we're talking about autonomous vehicles and mobility. I very quickly caught upon my own experience growing up in an urban area. And quite frankly, that's where we're launching and deploying our mobility and AV solutions. So we know that Black and Brown people will be affected, yet their voices are not in the room. And as much as I appreciate the opportunity to raise some of the unconventional, yet still conventional thoughts around inclusion and equity, I think there needs to be more voices. So we have a very clear talent problem in general when it comes to emerging technologies. But when you start to look at women and people of color, particularly Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, we start to see that talent problem become exacerbated. So I'd like to see more efforts in building up that talent pipeline, of helping people to understand that this is a viable career opportunity and that Ford is always hiring, looking for experienced designers, engineers, people to help shape the future of transportation for all.
That's great. I think that's really important to be thinking both from the user perspective of a very diverse audience. I know that making sure that some of these newer vehicles, electric autonomous vehicles, can fit wheelchairs. Can we design that in from the very beginning instead of having it be an afterthought? Or, as you said, cognitive differing abilities. So both from the user perspective, but then also from that designer perspective. There are a lot of different needs and experiences, and I'm thrilled that Ford is both working on equity and inclusion from a hiring standpoint as well as from a user standpoint. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and I hope as some of these efforts move forward that you can keep us posted. Is there any particular place people should go if they want to learn more about these efforts that you've been talking about?
Sure. You can go to our website, Ford.com, and tap onto autonomous vehicles and mobility. That will take you to our subsite. And there you can find all of the different projects that we're working on.
Great. A great place to get more information. Well, thank you so much for all of your important efforts, as well as and for taking the time today. And I always want to give a quick thank you to the true members who make this work possible. This Tapping into Transit series is only possible thanks to the people who donate to support our work. So anyone who hasn't yet, join at detroittransit.org/donate and let us know other great thought leaders in the mobility field that we should be bringing on to this Tapping into Transit series. Again, thank you so much, Clarinda Barnett-Harrison from Ford Equity and Inclusion. Have a great day.
Thank you. You do as well.